or just a
Hi, my name is Bridget Richardson. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives at the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And I'm here with Brian Greene, the President and CEO of the Houston Food Bank. So Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, well, I am so excited to talk with you because not only are you doing amazing things in Houston, but you're also a fellow Tennessee Vol. And so that is so exciting for me.
Yeah, except I don't have the block T right behind me like you keep. So, congratulations for representing the faith well.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm representing both University of Tennessee and University of St. Thomas in this respect. So I'm just so excited to share what you've been doing at Houston Food Bank and also just what you've been encountering and to see the COVID-19 pandemic through your worldview. So can you tell me a little bit about what it's been like for you since, I guess, things really ramped up in March?
Yeah, so of course, COVID is primarily, of course, a disease, but it has very significant economic consequences. So for us, this has been very much like just disaster work. So Houston Food Bank, we work with hundreds of partner organizations distributing food to families in need under normal circumstances. And we're used to, like after Hurricane Harvey, to significantly ramping up because people who have serious losses as a result of the hurricane. So in one way, this has been a lot like that. But in more ways, it's very different. So it's like disaster relief, only pretty much way worse and a lot more challenging.
And what are some of those big differences that you would say you're experiencing?
Oh, sure. So the first off was, how are we going to get the resources to be able to help people was immediately a very big question. Normally, we could rely on is the rest of the country to rally to our aid. In this case, well, the whole country is in the same boat. So I'm sorry, there is no cavalry. We're it, we the community. And then in addition, because this was also an economic loss, where our country very immediately, the stock market, dramatic drop, companies, especially the oil companies, energy sector companies, taking a huge hit. Would people be in a position to give? To be able to help was immediately a very big question. And then our ability to source donations, to source food. What food banks primarily get is surplus food. What we live on is that, this is a very wealthy country, so we have a lot of waste, and that waste can be utilized as a resource to channel to families who don't have means. But in this case, where like you saw the panic buying at the supermarkets, that was actually bad news for us, because that's normally how we get most of our stuff as well. What are the supermarkets not able to sell, or what is it that gets blocked further upstream because there's just not enough demand for it, where suddenly there was this huge demand? That was bad. So those things immediately hit, and then the fact that everything had to be done with this distancing made every transaction, everything that we do, twice as difficult. So like this facility is designed to handle up to 1,000 volunteers working at once, and we have limited it to 150. And for the first like 3 weeks, I think we had a hard time, even having more than like 30 people. So just people being willing to come out to trust that, yeah, we could run this safely. It was a big question. So we had all those obstacles, but then there were things that happened positive. That made it feasible for us to be able to help. So the first thing we noticed was that produce suddenly became wildly in abundance for us. So for many of the produce crops, the fresh produce market in the US, the majority of their sales are actually in restaurants. And when the restaurants were closed, which was absolutely a bad thing, but it did create a lot of surplus that we were then able to then utilize to help people. In many cases, those very same restaurant employees who would have been serving you, suddenly that their income was just gone. So that became available to us. And then in addition, dairy started to become available to us. You think about schools that closed. Schools consume a very large proportion of the milk supplied in the United States. Um, and then even meat started to become available to us. Again, if you go to a restaurant, for most people, certainly me would be an example. When I go to a restaurant, there's going to be a big piece of meat right in the center of the plate. No matter what type, what type of meal I'm having, it's going to emphasize meat. And so suddenly that wasn't being sold, and so that became available to us. And then after I think a slow start, we had some very notable givers like JJ and Khalil Watt. I think were our first really large donation that they gave, and a number of people have really come through for us. Right now, Alex Bregman is doing a huge fundraiser for us. But it first was a little slow, and I think that's very understandable. Unlike in a hurricane, where if you didn't get hit by the hurricane, you knew you were fine. In this case, no matter who you are, you don't really know you're fine. But no, we've had just a lot of giving, and that's enabled us to go out and buy product. So we're buying product by millions of dollars worth of product now. So that we can then add that to the produce we're able to get, the meat, the dairy, and then we're able to supplement it with the dry goods that people generally like, the grains, the cans, and things like that. And so the other part then was the distribution out in the community, really challenging there because all of our partners had to change their model. The best pantries normally, they set up like a little store. And it's certainly not like going to a Kroger or HEB or Walmart or something, where it's very limited SKUs. Here's like the 30 or 40 different items, but at least you can select within that what your family actually likes and be a little more generous on one thing and skip something else. Here with social distancing, that's just not feasible. And so we've had to move to overwhelmingly trunk distributions, where there's like a drive-through. It is difficult to do it that way because you have to, there's a lot of labor to then make, instead of normally the food bank would say, we send the cases of apples along with other things to the partner pantry. Well, you can't put a case of apples in somebody's car, so now you're going to have to bag that up on the spot. That's a lot of labor. But it's also not a very human way to work with people. When people go to a pantry, it's not a fun thing to do. Normally, people, it's fairly traumatic for people. People can be humiliated to do that, unfortunately. And so being able to be reassuring and be able to talk to people and be comforting is kind of a big deal when you're doing this work, and it's almost impossible to do. So that's kind of like the landscape that we've been working with. And that's very different than anything we've ever seen.
Yeah, and the human parts that you're touching on are so important when you're meeting those basic needs, right? With just feeding a family. How have y'all had to adapt and change to try to make that human connection when, you have to do that trunk distribution like that?
Well, yeah, it's not good enough would be my answer. So we started to notice things that we were doing wrong, such as people, you got to keep their windows up, and you're trying to direct the traffic, and you're trying to be fast, and you find that the volunteers staff starting to yell at the cars to move faster, and I was like, dang, come on, how do we be, I know we want to try and do this as fast as we can to get to as many people, but we have to be nice to people here like we would normally not be talking to people like that. So that we've definitely improved on. But the reality is you can. I mean, you wave, you try and smile. Well, you can't smile because you got a mask and you can do it all you want. They can't see you, but try and have some nice interactions. The health department did come back to us. Originally, our guidelines for serving people in cars was they had to keep their windows up. They've now said, well, they can have the window halfway down so long as you've got a mask and stay at least 6 feet away. So trying to do a little bit more so we can talk to people at least some. One thing that we started doing that I think is kind of neat is, unfortunately, cars inevitably line up ahead of time. Nobody wants to be the car that didn't get served. And it happens, frankly, I might be at most distributions, frankly. I mean, because there's no level of service we haven't seen where the lines don't just simply go past what we can do. So they line up in advance, but at least one of the things that we started doing is we have volunteers out trying to help people with their census. because that's something that really, Houston area is very bad for undercount on census. And so we've been working hard as a community on, well, how do we make sure that everybody gets counted? And now that we have that you can actually do it on your phone. And so we're like the volunteers going out with it. They've got a big sign with a QR code on there. And while you're waiting, and like sign encouragement, hey, you can do it right now in English and in Spanish, while you're waiting. So yeah, trying to get something out of this.
Yeah, and for your volunteers to be there and available and ready to help and even to adapt and do that kind of census outreach, how has your volunteer climate been? I know at first people were probably really nervous, like you had mentioned, but are people coming out of that now?
Yes, people are coming out of that. People are adjusting to this as a new normal. Um, my only concern is we need to make sure that people don't get complacent. And we, as a food handling organization, we can't have that period. We cannot become a COVID hotspot. So we have extremely strict practices here. But then on top of that, when we're out in the community, it's really easy for people to start to get casual and forget that, hey, there's a lot of safety issues here. But so at first, yeah, volunteers were just really difficult to come by, and our distributions really lacked as a result. Now we're able to get the shifts much more full. We started offering up volunteering at the distribution sites as an additional opportunity in addition to what the partners are able to do. We have the National Guard has stepped in, and so right now we have 390 National Guard members. They're doing everything from home deliveries for like the seniors, or the quarantine cases. They're helping with that, and there's a number of other resources doing that, like crowdsource rescue. These guys made an app, and the app basically is crowdsourcing, and now that's been purposed for doing home delivery work. So they're picking up from partners and straight from here. But anyway, so the National Guard are also doing that. Some of the National Guard members have CDL truck, commercial driver's licenses, and so they're driving trucks for us. We've got forklift operators. They're working here, and then we're using the National Guard members as volunteers for many of the distribution sites now. And then in addition, the Greater Houston Community Foundation and the United Way started a fund to hire laid-off hospitality workers to do shift work for us. And we're deploying them at district to help partners with their distribution work, because again, it's becoming less an issue being able to have the volunteers you had. It's just how much more work this is keeping up with that, and we're trying to do every avenue we can.
Hearing you talk about this is absolutely incredible because intellectually, I think I know Houston Food Bank and what you do, but to hear about all the touch points and partnerships and moving pieces in the community and with different people, it's incredible. Like, how do you keep your head on straight? This is unbelievable.
Well, yeah, a big thing is nobody tries to do everything. And that's a big part of how our philosophy is. We try to do everything in partnership. If we tried to do all this, it'd be impossible. And myself as a president, if I tried to actually make all these decisions and put these pieces together, it would be impossible. When you've looked at my bio, I mean, I started in food banking over 30 years ago, back when I could actually know everything and run everything and make every decision. And I learned years ago that that is totally not the secret for success, at least on any sort of large scale. So we've just got so many people, and they work in areas, and then we try and make sure that everybody hooks together and to coordinate this. But yeah, the way we look at this work is everything we get, it's one way or another, it's voluntary. We can't control what food donations we're able to get. We cannot able to control what monetary donations we can get. We're not able to control how many volunteers we can get or what they can do. We're not able to control which organizations in the community want to step up and do this kind of work. And we just somehow try and piece all those things together at the highest level we can without breaking. And I think part of what's been good for us is Houston was willing to invest in what is a very large infrastructure, so that we would not be the constraint as much as possible. That we could say yes to as many volunteers who are willing to actually volunteer rather than be capped at a very low number. We could say yes to way more food at a time than any other food bank can say yes to. And then that's kind of enabled us to kind of juggle things at I think at a higher level.
And that thought of what you can control and what you can't control, how for you is that freeing as a leader to maybe just let the community move, let the community be engaged in what you're doing and to show how they want to be involved in what you're trying to do to meet the most basic needs for those who right now lost jobs and just need dinner.
Yeah, there's a number of pieces of wisdoms that came out of your mouth right there. I think the first off is people often will say, "Well, are you doing more because need is more?" We have never met need. No food bank in the country has. I mean, if we'd actually met need, we wouldn't have hunger or food insecurity. We do the best we can with what we can get. And we recognize that food insecurity is not some isolated thing. It's poverty. That's what's really driving all of this. So knowing that, yes, no matter how much we do, that's not going to be enough, and you got to learn to be okay with that. And that's the first part, is like, is taking that pressure off, do the best you can, and don't worry about what you can't control beyond what you control. And then, okay, it's got to be always about leverage. The way we look at our work is we want to, as much as possible, what we do is take, a dollar worth of cash and turn it into multiple dollars worth of food distribution. So it's always leveraged this way, and then it's always leveraged in resources in the community. If we try to do everything, we won't get nearly as much done as if we find some way to partner with some other organization, let them be the people on the front line working with the clients. How do we best help them? And then it's the coalition of the willing. Is trying to get people to do something if they don't want to do it. Trying to talk somebody into volunteering who doesn't want to volunteer, don't do it. Even if you do get them, they're not going to be that motivated. They're not going to get that much done. Trying to talk an organization that, they want to be focused on something else, don't do it. Find who really wants to step up, who wants to work this way. And the same thing works for donors. I mean, the reality is there's so many different very good causes, and there's so many great big needs in the community. Like, education, that's a big deal. It's like, all right, if that's what their focus is, I'm not going to try and talk them into doing this. I'm going to try and find who's willing. And, once you start to have that kind of mentality, it takes a lot of stress off of you.
I love that phrase, coalition of the willing. That is a wonderful way to just put people in place who want to help you, and don't worry about those who don't, just put people who want to be there and want to work hard. I love that. And so you're also going to be in partnership with University of St. Thomas soon as well. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, so we're already interested in schools from the standpoint of how do we help students stay in school who otherwise have income insecurity. Food insecurity is the way it could manifest it. But so we started a thing we call a food scholarship program, and we've been building that started with mostly the community colleges, where the idea was we would commit to provide a scholarship. Only we don't have like $2,000 in cash, but we can commit $2,000 worth of food plus to the student. And the whole goal not being so much, oh, did we keep the student from ever going hungry? No, did we help that student stay in school? That's the real goal. So we're already interested in University of St. Thomas, because University of St. Thomas, in addition to being a great school, also really tries to identify first generation students and what we can do. And we think we can be helpful, period. But in addition to that, University of St. Thomas is interested in helping us weather this little storm, and we're very grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about speaks to your mission statement, filling pantries, filling lives. And just to finish it up, how do you see that mission statement, carrying through as we, move out of, we're in the pandemic now, we're going to be embracing a new normal. How do you see that mission statement really coming alive for not only the Houston Food Bank, but the Houston community in general?
Well, we actually, we've changed our mission.
Oh,
We still have that as a tagline, but it's probably the vision that is where is the most catching. Is as we've come to see our work, um, where we really think success is with the vision that we have is a world that doesn't need this. That doesn't need food banks. When I started 30 years ago, we thought that we could food bank our way out of hunger, because there's so much food waste in the United States, and you compare how much food waste there is versus how much hunger is. There's way more food waste than hunger. The idea was, hey, let's just bring them two together and do it. And we got fairly good at the logistics of this work. We, the food banks, are in the Feeding America food banks in the country, but hunger didn't go down. And we were just, I think, naive in our understanding of the root cause. And we were thinking of hunger as an isolated thing. And, we can't just think of our work as our work. It's how does our work fit into the larger picture for families who are struggling, and how do we make it so that they're not struggling? And that's why we're so interested ultimately in channeling these resources to support people so that they won't need us anymore, rather than how do we just feed them another day. When we're in a situation like this, we kind of have to put that aside. It gets okay, look, this is an economic resource, and suddenly there is a much larger income gap for a much larger population. All right, get them as much help as you can, and hopefully, we can get the economy going strong enough so that we can get people out of our line, and we can go back to trying to be more deliberate in how we apply the food. But in the meantime, we just have got to get as much of this resource out as we can to those families.
yeah. And how many partnerships, just ballpark, would you say you have in the Houston area?
1,500.
Oh my goodness. I feel
Normally.
like
Now, most of them are on dormancy.
right,
Go ahead.
right. But on your website, you can just go, I was looking, you can go and click and see exactly where there's a distribution site near you. I like how you put, don't waste the gas, just click here and find your distribution site, right?
Yeah, so currently, let's see, I think it's over 200 that would be on that clickable site. So normally we're also, we are like the backpack program is in 700 schools. The after school programs, we're serving like 130 of those. And so there's normally a lot more. Now the after school programs all shut down. The schools are closed. So we're now more to the classic pantries, but then also the extra distributions that we've set up. And we've had, again, going back to the Coalition of Willing, we've had, a number of, other organizations that normally wouldn't be doing this. They said, well, this is what the community needs. So like the YMCA is doing these big produce distributions for us, and combined with Brighter Bites. And then the Boys and Girls Club have been stepping up. They're doing big distributions because, their sites are otherwise closed, and they want to be helping their community. So, hey, they step up and they're doing it.
Well, I think that the partnerships that you are maintaining are just a beautiful expression of what's great about Houston. People coming together, helping their neighbors, serving one another in a time of need. So thank you so much for this conversation and for all that you do for Houston and the Houston Food Bank. It truly is admirable.
Well, thank you, Bridget, and go Vols. And I'm sorry, what is University of St. Thomas? Is that Lions or?
It's Celts.
Celts, the
Yeah.
Celts. Of course,
Go
it'd be the Celts. Go Celts, and go Celts.
There you go. Well, it's so nice talking to you. Have a good one.
Thank you.